Welcome to The Explainer. So, you're thinking about using an egg donor. That's a huge step, and it brings you to a really big decision. Should you go with fresh or frozen eggs? Both paths can absolutely lead you to the family you're dreaming of, but, the journeys are super different. Let's break them down.
So you've made the decision to use an egg donor. That's amazing. But that just opens up the next big question, right? As you can see, you're looking at two very different paths, and each one comes with its own set of pros and cons that are really going to shape your whole experience.
Okay, so before we start comparing the two journeys, let's just make sure we're all on the same page. What are we actually talking about when we say fresh versus frozen donor eggs? It's really important to get this straight because it's the foundation for everything else.
Think of a fresh cycle as a real-time, coordinated dance. It's a super personalized process. You find and screen your ideal donor, and then you have to medically sync their cycle with the intended parent cycle so that the embryo transfer can happen right away. Everything has to line up just perfectly.
Frozen eggs, on the other hand, are basically ready to go when you are. These eggs have already been retrieved from donors who've been screened, and they're just waiting in an egg bank. You get to select a batch from the bank's inventory. It's kind of like shopping from a catalog, and they ship them to your clinic whenever you're ready to start.
Okay, so we've got the definitions down. Now let's talk about the actual journey. How do these two options really play out when it comes to your timeline and the whole process you'll go through?
Right off the bat, the biggest difference you're going to feel is the timeline. A fresh cycle is a marathon, okay? It often takes 2 to 3 months, sometimes even longer, just to get everything coordinated. The frozen path? It's a sprint. The eggs are there, ready for you to use pretty much immediately.
So why the long wait for a fresh cycle?
Well, that 2 to 3 month timeline is jam-packed with these essential steps that have to happen one after the other. You have to find your donor, they have to go through all the medical and genetic screening, you have to get the legal contracts done, and then you can coordinate the medical cycle itself. Every single piece has to fall into place. Now, the frozen path, so much more direct. It's pretty much as simple as this. You pick the eggs you want from the bank's database, you purchase them, and you get them shipped to your clinic. It lets you skip all that complex coordination and waiting you have with a fresh cycle.
Beyond the timeline, the investment is a huge factor, and I'm talking both financial and emotional. So next up, let's compare the cost and the level of certainty you can expect from each path. This is where things get really clear. Fresh cycles, they're almost always going to cost more, and you're dealing with some real uncertainty. Things can get delayed or even canceled. Frozen cycles, on the other hand, are generally more affordable and offer a much, much higher degree of predictability right from the start. So why does a fresh cycle cost more? Well, that higher price tag covers a whole package: the donor's compensation, agency fees, legal stuff, and maybe even travel. But here's the catch. You're dealing with people. Schedules can change, a donor might need to withdraw, and that can cause some really frustrating and expensive delays. With frozen eggs, the financial side is just simpler. You pay a fixed price for a specific number of eggs, so you know what you're getting into. And because those eggs are already retrieved and sitting in a freezer, the risk of the whole cycle falling through before you even start is pretty much gone. All right, we've hit time and money, but let's be real. The thing you really care about is the outcome, right? Let's get into the number of eggs you can expect, the potential for loss along the way, and what the data says about success rates. Okay, so a big difference here is the sheer number of eggs. With a fresh cycle, you're usually looking at a pretty big haul, anywhere from 15 to 30 eggs, although that number can vary depending on the donor. With frozen, you're buying a specific, smaller batch, usually somewhere between 6 and 12 eggs. Now, this is a really important point for frozen eggs, the thaw. Thanks to this amazing flash freezing technique called vitrification, about 80 to 90% of eggs survive just fine. But that does mean you have to factor in that you might lose 10 to 20% of your eggs right at the start. It's just part of the process. So what about success rates? The bottom line is both methods are really, really effective. But if you look at a ton of data, we're talking nearly 50,000 transfers. The research does show that fresh donor eggs have a slight, but statistically significant advantage when it comes to live birth rates. All right, we've gone through the timeline, the money, and the potential outcomes. Let's put it all together now and really try to figure out how you can decide which path is the right one for your family building goals. When you lay it all out like this, side by side, the trade-offs become super clear, don't they? Fresh gives you the potential for more eggs, but it comes with more uncertainty and a higher cost. Frozen gives you speed, certainty, and a lower price tag, but you're working with fewer eggs and that small risk of thaw loss.
So, who is a fresh cycle really for? Well, it's probably the best choice for you if your absolute top priority is having the widest possible selection of donors, or if you want to create a larger number of embryos, which is a great idea if you're planning for future siblings or want to do genetic testing. On the flip side, if you're thinking, I need to start now, my budget is tight, and I just can't handle any more uncertainty, then frozen eggs are probably calling your name. It's a really compelling and efficient option that lets you get started without all the what ifs.
So what's the bottom line here? At the end of the day, there's no single best answer that fits everybody. The right choice is deeply personal. It really all boils down to your specific timeline, your budget, your family goals, and just your comfort level with uncertainty. And so, we're going to leave you with this one big question to think about. What truly matters most to you on this path? Is it the speed and certainty of the frozen route? Or is it maximizing your options and the number of embryos with a fresh cycle? Answering that question for yourself will point you toward the right next step on your journey.